I'd like to call this meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustments, a regular meeting for March 17th, 2022. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll rise with me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. I think y'all were all emailed minutes ahead of time. Give you a minute to review them and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, a motion, we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to our regular agenda for the public hearing to consider a request for a variance of the zoning ordinance section 118-427A for reduction in the minimum lot requirements for proposed subdivision of Lot 1, Block 3 of the Bonita subdivision located at 1905 Pearl Street. The request has been submitted by M. Wesley and Associates Real Estate, case file ZBA 2022-01. Elena?
Thank you. Lena Helton, City Planner. As stated, the request is for a variance to minimum lot dimensions for subdivision. This property is located at 1905 Pearl Street at the northwest intersection of Pearl Street and Ellington. This area is primarily developed with single-family homes along Pearl Street, but it also includes a mix of a medium to high density development, including multifamily projects just to the east and west. And so this is an image of the property. Again, it's developed with a single-family home that was built back in the 60s. And one of the purposes of the subdivision is to maintain the current home. So they are proposing a subdivision in such a way that the existing structure would stay as it is, and then the development would be on the newly created vacant lot. The nature of the request is a variance. The ZBA rules and procedures state that a variance from the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance may be requested when owing to exceptional and extraordinary conditions. The literal enforcement of the provisions of the zoning regulations would result in unnecessary hardship in the development of the property. And so the section that we're looking at is section 118-427A, minimum lot dimensions. And the purpose of these standards is to create orderly, predictable, and efficient development, to safeguard and enhance property values, to protect public and private investment by preventing landowners from overcrowding the property of others, and to allow for adequate spacing between buildings and for emergency access. These lot dimensions are based on the zoning district, so each zoning district has its own minimum lot dimensions. The property is zoned R1 single family, and so these variances are specific to that existing R1 single family zoning district. So the lot dimensions for R1 single family include a minimum lot width of 75 feet, a minimum lot depth of 110 feet, which results in a lot area of 8,250 square feet. And so if you look at the columns next to it, you'll see the two proposed tracts that are created from the subdivision. Primarily tract 1, that's where the existing single family home is. It primarily will still continue to meet the minimum dimension standards, except that it will be 10 feet short of the minimum lot depth. The newly created lot is a short or does not meet the minimum for all of the required dimension standards, including lot width, depth, and area. Now this lot and the adjacent lots within the subdivision are oversized for your typical R1 single-family lot. As stated, the typical R1 single-family lot is 8,200 square feet. This lot is actually, whenever you look at the combined, it's about 13,000 square feet. And so this subdivision does include overly sized lots, and the lots on the corner are even larger than that to accommodate for additional building setbacks. And so just wanted to point that out. If it were about 3,000 square foot larger, it would actually be large enough to completely subdivide and meet all of the dimensional standards. And so this is the original subdivision that was recorded back in the 50s. And you see lot 1, and this is the lot configuration as it stands today. You see the one-story building that actually fronts Pearl Street as a driveway onto Ellington. And then the new lot will have a lot width of 49 feet and a lot depth of 90 feet. And so will be about 4,500 square feet in total. And so based on this we have provided some exhibits just to show you kind of what could still be built on the property, that it still is a developable property, even though it's smaller than what you would typically see for that zoning category. So based on the building setbacks of the district, 25 feet in the front, 20 feet in the rear, and then 6 feet on each side, there is a remaining buildable area of about 1,700 square feet. And if you take into account required parking for each dwelling unit, each single-family lot has to have 2 parking spaces outside of that building setback in the front. They can still accommodate a 1,300 square foot living space with a 2-car garage, which is typical of what we're seeing for new construction for single-family development. And when you look at the existing homes in the area, the lots are large, but the actual homes also fall within this range. And so the actual structure wouldn't be out of character with some of the other single-family homes in the area. We also wanted to provide some images of some similarly sized homes in the community to give you an idea, a visual idea of what could be built on the property. So we see Pruitt Hill Circle in the upper left, St. James, which is that Park Place subdivision on the right, and then Wettermark Street on the lower left. And again, we just wanted to give you an idea of what type of single-family development this size lot could accommodate. These are just some more images of Pearl Street. Wanted to give you an idea of the different development that's actually at the intersection. So this is standing in the intersection looking directly at the property. This is standing in the driveway of the property. The photo on the left is looking north down Pearl Street, and the photo on the right is looking down Pearl Street. So at the actual intersection, they are all 4 single-family structures. This image is looking to the west, down Ellington. So you can see the Ellington terminates into an apartment complex. I think it's Parkview is the name of that complex. And then this image is looking east, and there's another apartment complex, and then it terminates into North Street. And this section of Pearl Street is actually signalized. So at Ellington, there's a stop sign on both sides. So it is a traffic-controlled intersection. As part of the 200-foot notices that are required, we did send a total of 12 letters to property owners within the 200-foot area. We did receive 1 written response. That was from the property manager of the apartment complex to the northeast. So if you're looking at the image, it's that uppermost green star. The access to that complex is actually off of College. Thank you. It's actually off of College, so it is a little farther removed. We also received a phone call from Mr. Wood. He owns the property that is 2 lots south of Ellington on the left. There's a purple star. He owns and resides there, and he also owns the lot at the southeast corner of this catty corner to the subject property. And his primary concerns were related to traffic. So this is a mainly rental area. It does have a lot of multifamily, and so there probably is more traffic than you would see on a typical traditional single-family street. However, the addition of a unit really doesn't create any concern for the engineering department, and really is negligible when you're talking about the impact. And coming out of the property, you actually have to stop at Ellington before you enter into oncoming traffic. And so staff doesn't find that the subdivision will not have any adverse impacts on traffic in the area or the adjacent properties, as they're already all developed. So the conditions for approval of variance are outlined on your screen, and we also provided these in your staff report. The future land use plan, the comprehensive plan, also calls out single family for this area, and so the proposed subdivision does accommodate for additional single family lot. Staff doesn't find that the subdivision, although it doesn't meet compliance, that it will adversely affect the adjacent properties because they're already developed out, and the impact is negligible whenever you're talking about the increase in density. We also find that this area is already has a mix of medium and high density residential development with the multifamily development that's already in the area. The frontage that the newly created lot will have is sufficient for the property and for emergency access. And staff also finds that the remaining developable property is more than enough to accommodate a single-family structure of similar size and character of the other properties in the neighborhood. I did want to mention one thing. So the property owner has stated in the future they might actually be seeking a zone change for the new created lot. This is the one that's that track 2, the one that's going to have the developable area 1,700 square feet. They have stated in the future they might pursue a zone change to duplex, but we haven't received an application for that. And that's just something that's, I think, more of a long-term goal. And so when we're looking at the application in front of you, we're basing it off of the requirements for single-family, off of the current zoning, what's allowed today. And any kind of zoning process or zoning request would be a separate process, but it would be a very public, transparent process. So we would conduct a public hearing, just like this, take it to our Planning and Zoning Commission for review, and then they would make a recommendation to City Council, also have a public hearing where the adjacent property owners would have an opportunity to come and speak on the item, and so it would be a very similar process to what we're doing today. But I did just want to note that, and that is a separate and a completely separate process from the item that you're hearing this evening, but did just want to mention it because that is kind of some of the long-term goals of the property owner. The applicant, Mario Wesley, is representing the property owner, and he's in attendance. If the board should have any questions, and with that, I'll conclude our presentation and open it up for any questions from the board.
Any questions of Elena?
Is the subject property owner occupied?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the person applying for the variance occupies this property and is seeking to subdivide their property that they occupy and live in. I just want to make sure I'm
Yes.
100% on that.
And I can let Marius speak to it further, but the intent is for this to be a supplemental rental income. And so they'll
Okay.
maintain the residence at the primary structure, which is why it's been subdivided in the way that it has. And then the second lot will be future rental property for additional income, essentially.
Okay.
Are they going to rebuild?
No, ma'am, they're going to be maintaining the current house and its configuration, which is why they've carved it out the way that they have. They don't want to tear down the house that's there because they're living in it. They want to maintain it. And so the new construction would be on the new lot, and the existing house would remain where it is today.
Is the new lot at this point vacant?
What they're showing is the proposed new lot is vacant. So if we look at the aerial and actually, let me pull up an image, might be better. I think we have a photo that captures it pretty well. So that fenced-in area that you see on the screen, all that is the backyard, and it's all open and vacant. And so essentially, a lot of these lots are very deep. The homes are in the front, and they have very large backyards. And so where they're proposing this new lot to be created, it's undeveloped. It's just trees and open area.
Are they going to face the house towards Pearl? Or will it be just in back of the edifice that's there now?
The new lot will face and take access to Ellington. And so Ellington will be that front yard. And so the existing home fronts Pearl Street. It'll continue to front Pearl Street, but they also have a driveway to Ellington. And so the new lot won't have direct access to Pearl. It'll have a driveway off of Ellington.
Okay, well, then I must be thinking of the wrong property. I'm sorry.
And I'm trying to find an image that's maybe better. So this is actually the existing subdivision, and so you can see it's right there on the hard corner, the northwest corner of Pearl, Pearl and Ellington. So where Ellington terminates, that's where the new lot will be located.
Because of this house.
Can you go to the survey image, please?
Where's the one that's
Oh,
existing?
let me see if I have a lot of slides.
Yeah, sure.
Here we go.
So, just a quick question. This, where you're showing the red 12 foot, I'm assuming from the back of the subject property to the
Structure, yes,
proposed
ma'am.
new, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Are you showing that as,
I didn't drive out there.
why is that line showing cut into the building? Would that make the subject property over the setback line, and then they would need a variance for the subject property as well?
Thank you. And it's in the staff report, but I forgot to mention it during the presentation. So
Sure.
the rear building setback is 20 feet. And so the new lot, the heavy dark line that you see in the middle, does actually create an 8-foot encroachment for the existing structure. So instead of being 20 feet from the rear property line, it's about 12 and a half. So really it's going to create about 7.5-foot encroachment. And so that is something that we included in the the staff report, but I forgot to mention it during the initial presentation. Thank you for pointing that out,
Absolutely.
yes.
So we would be voting on both things, or voting on one would naturally allow for the second?
Voting on the lot dimensions would, in essence, approve the encroachment into the building setback.
Okay, but it is going to take, not only is this lot going to be out of compliance, but it's also going to throw the subject property out of compliance as well.
Yes, ma'am, but it will
Okay.
be conforming because the variance in essence makes it
Sure.
legal. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So as far as refinancing or anything like that, it wouldn't encumber the property because the variance will legalize that 7.5-foot encroachment. Does that make sense?
yes. The lot width for a 49-foot, of course, this is for single-family standards.
Yes, ma'am.
Does 49-foot meet multifamily R2, R4 standards? I know those standards are different for,
Yes, ma'am, it does.
okay, so what is the minimum width, lot width for a, say, R2 or R4?
So and let me, all right, so the minimum lot depth the minimum lot width for R2 is 60. So as you increase in density, the lot width actually becomes relaxed. So for R1, which is what the property is zoned today, it's 75. For R2, which is still single family, it's 60. For R3, which is duplex zoning, it's 50 for single family detached and 50 for duplex. And for R4, which is multifamily, it's also 50 feet. And so it's
Okay.
essentially all the other zoning districts, minimum is 50 regardless, unless you're doing like a townhome development, which would allow for a reduced lot width as well. But that's specific
Sure.
for townhouse subdivisions.
Okay, okay. And the same on the lot depth?
Yes, ma'am. So for lot depth, it is 110 feet for each residential, it's 110 feet for R1, it's 100 feet for R2, R3, and R4.
Okay, so it's out of compliance for all three others, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Okay. So if they applied to rezone it later, the variance would carry for, as far as lot width and lot depth would already be in place, so they would just be applying to rezone.
Yes, ma'am, because it's at that point, it's a legal lot of record. And so we would acknowledge that the zone change actually would make it more in compliance, but that this is an established approved lot, and so you are correct.
Is there a reason why they opted to not do 50 feet on the lot width?
I would like to defer to the
Mario?
the
Okay,
applicant.
sure. I think those are all my questions
Any
right
other
now.
questions of Elena? Okay, thank you, Elena. Mr. Wesley, would you like to speak?
Want me to come up there?
Yes, please.
Yeah, if it makes it wider to the 50 feet, it'll be a little bit closer to that house, and that kind of dark or blurred area, that's the concrete, kind of like a patio. So, I mean, any feet going back towards the house would just kind of make it a little bit closer and, you know, just cut into it a little bit more than what it would need to be.
Okay,
But I mean, I'm sure they can add, I mean, it looks like it's less than a foot.
right.
So, I mean, I'm sure, you know, like I said, they haven't did a final survey or anything, so I'm sure that could be to make that just 50 feet.
Okay.
Do the current owners have plans for that lot, or they're just creating a lot?
Yeah, they would like to put some type of income producing property on that lot behind there.
Okay.
And this is a owner that's gonna stay there, so it's not someone that's, you know, selling the house or selling anything. So whatever's back there, you know, she's gonna want it to be pleasant for her, because she's gonna stay there.
Is this in a floodplain or a partial floodplain right here?
No, it doesn't show to be in a floodplain or anything.
Okay, it's like just shy of it, maybe? Okay.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Wesley? Okay, thanks, Mario. This is a public hearing, and I'd like to open it up for public comment, either for or against the proposal. So if anyone would like to come speak either for or against it. Gary, come up.
Yes.
lived here and I moved across the street here. But I'll explain it.
Okay, we're just going off the appraisal district information.
Well, the appraisal, yes,
From the
the appraisal district shows this to be my house.
Yeah.
My house is 221 Ellington.
Okay.
And I can tell you the history because I moved there when I was 3 years old. I want to stipulate that Mario and I are friends, and we're going to be friends when we walk out of here, and I'm not here to file a protest or an appeal. I'm curious, though, did you not get a letter from John Sharp?
No.
He told me he sent his letter in.
We never received one from him.
Okay, you might want to touch base with him because I know he is in opposition. I'm realistic enough to understand a lot of things, and I'm dumb enough not to understand more than what I do understand. So I'm here because I don't understand. And I do have some questions. When I talked to Juan, when I got the letter, and it's not because I'm concerned about if I was concerned about what's going on, I wouldn't live on the corner of Ellington and Pearl, I can guarantee you that. Not near River Park Apartments. But I told my kids a long time ago, that's where I started, that's where I want to end, so that's the house I want to die in. Not anytime soon, but that's where I plan to be. I bought my brother out, we owned it together when my folks died, and my son is in the other house on Pearl Street. When I moved there, Pearl Street was dirt, there were no curbs. Star Street looked exactly the same as it does today on that section between Pearl and North Street. It has never improved. There was one house on the west side of Pearl Street between Pearl and Ellington, and that was Herb Pittman's house. The next house that was built is where my son is because Lester B. Sitton built it. The house that the Star on Ellington Street where you had me in correctly, that's where Lester B. lived. He moved across the street, he built a house identical to the house he moved out of. Can't explain that at all. The questions I have is, one, the lady who lives at 905, and she is a genuinely nice lady. That is not her primary residence. She does not claim a homestead because she's a nurse and she works in different places, and she bought the house to have a place to stay when she's in Nacogdoches, so she's not often there, which is not a problem. Because she is a nice lady. And the fact that she's not there is nice and quiet because there's nobody in her house. So I enjoy that. When I look at Bonita subdivision, it had real strong reservations about zone changes in the creation of the subdivision, which are now defunct because it's gone past its time frame. So it's subject to game, in the real world today. I question how an individual, I have a house and I have room between my house and the lot line, I could do the same thing. A lot of houses have room that could possibly do the same thing. My question to you is, how does the division of a lot, but not the severing of the ownership, not make it required that this be a zone change? Because you have a single family lot owned by one person, but now with two structures on it. That's multifamily, in my opinion, when you tie it to the actual owner. And I may be wrong. I'm just throwing out thoughts to you. The other concern I have is when I talk to Juan, he doesn't know what the plan is to be built. He knows what can be built there, but when you and I talked, you really didn't know. When I talked to Mario, he told me duplexes. So my question is this going to be a zone change requirement, if that's what they do, and when will you know what they're going to do? And why is it that one person can take their lot, split it in two, build a second structure, and that doesn't require a zone change?
Okay.
So I don't know if I can get answers today, or if you'll let me know later, or
Lena?
am I way off?
So the zoning ordinance states that for single family, you can only have one primary structure per lot. And so this variance essentially creates a new lot, a separate lot, that would allow for the construction of a new home. So the result would be two legally subdivided lots that would allow for a new home on that newly created
So
lot.
I could come in and do the same thing.
Technically, you could request it, yes. Now, one of the reasons why this lot is, I think, more appropriate than some of the other lots in the area is because it is a corner lot. It does have street frontage on Ellington and Pearl, and it is overly sized. And so if it were a lot in the middle of the block, we would be having a different conversation because it would require access to go through another developed property. And so in that regard, it would still be single family. The variance wouldn't allow anything other than what the current property is zoned for. And then any additional zoning application would go through a public hearing process where you would receive a letter from staff saying, hey, your neighbor submitted a zone change application. We're gonna have these public hearings at this time and date. We'd actually take a step further and put a sign out on the property, send postcards to people within 500 feet. So we actually have much more broader notifications requirements for a zone change. We let more people know about it in the neighborhood. And there's more public hearings, so there's a longer process for people to come in and provide public input than for just a typical variance where they're asking for a single deviation from a standard. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
I don't agree
Did I answer
with
your
it.
question?
I
Okay.
don't agree with it, but it makes sense. Here, does this stay here or you want it?
stays there.
You know, and I'm just talking to y'all based on what my thoughts are, which that can be a problem in itself. It seems like that opens the door for anybody that has an oversized lot to circumvent the requirement for a zone change and realistically end up with multifamily, single ownership, single lot realistically, even though it's big enough to subdivide, she's still the owner. It doesn't make sense that y'all don't have to go through a zone change requirement on this issue, especially if he's gonna do a duplex. And if I had one request, it would be that the city monitors the areas like where I am, R1 zoning, that have gone. A subdivision has a life cycle. It'll be primarily residential, it'll go primarily rental, then all of a sudden people will come in, want to fix up older houses, and it becomes owner occupied again. It cycles, and I understand that. But the problem where we are, the real problem where we are, is in those rent houses, nobody monitors how many college kids are living in that house. I've got one across the street from me, has 5 cars in the yard all the time. That's the noise problem, that's the traffic problem, is I don't think R1 zoning is you're not in a position where you can control it easily, because a renter has one person on the lease, knowing that there's 4 or 5 people splitting it up amongst them, and that's kind of an issue. The area has been kind of going downhill, especially if you go past College Street, if you get on Bonita Street. You know, you can drive the neighborhoods, you can see the difference. And we seem to have had quite a few rent houses that have gone owner occupied, like it's resurging. It's just not doing it fast enough, you know, to get there. So I don't have a problem with Mario. I certainly don't have a problem with my neighbor. But I do question, is this circumventing the requirement for a zone change? If they were gonna subdivide the lot, sell it to somebody else, they were gonna build a home on it, even a rent house, separate ownership, that makes sense to me. But the same owner, just splitting the lot gives them the ability to do something that the zoning doesn't allow for that one lot in its original state. It seems like you're circumventing. And with that, I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Gary. Any other comments or questions?
I do. Maybe what Elena's about to say, but so what we decide in here, if we approve this, they can only build a single family dwelling at this point. So there cannot be, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, there cannot be a duplex built on there until they get a zoning change.
Yes, ma'am. And in regards to the ownership, I mean, the applicant has stated that they're gonna reside there, but there's nothing to stop them from selling it tomorrow.
Right,
When we're looking at variances and zone changes, ownership is neutral. And so regardless of if they're gonna sell it tomorrow, that doesn't impact
It's not
use
a
that's
factor.
allowed on the property. And so, but you're correct. If the variance is approved and this new lot is created, the only thing that could be built there is one single-family home, unless they go through the zone change process. And that's true whether or not they maintain ownership of it, or if they sell it to someone else, it would be the same restrictions.
And also, unfortunately, the lack of monitoring on renters is not a factor that we can consider or control either.
Yeah, and we have issues with code enforcement across the city. I think the closer you get to campus, you do see a higher concentration of that type of activity and behavior. We are working on strategies to be more proactive in that regard. Part of this comprehensive planning process that we're looking at is looking at some of these older neighborhoods and identifying areas where maybe we can do some city intervention as far as helping revitalize, redevelop, creating strategies that focus on behavior versus occupancy to help address some of these issues. So those are things that we are working on because, like Mr. Wood said, the enforcement is very difficult in those circumstances, unfortunately.
Okay. Any other questions?
Did we hear the recommendation from staff? Did you give a recommendation? I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
And I apologize, my mic is being funny. Staff is recommending approval.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Ed, am I right that it requires on these required findings that we have to meet all 6 of those? Is that correct? I believe that's the way I read the ordinance, or
I think
Elena
that's
maybe
correct.
answer.
Yes, yes. And so the way that the language reads, and I pull it up in the staff report so we can make sure we're reading it correctly. Yes, so the zoning board may grant variances upon finding the following conditions have been met. And so you're looking at all of these conditions and making sure that it meets every single one.
You know, just 5 there, and if you look back at their application as well, same thing. You know, it says there's no unique circumstance existing on the property, which is one of the things that's required to have, is that there is due to unique, and as well as not being on 6, not being a self-created hardship,
Yeah.
and I don't see how this isn't self-created by wanting to go in there and split the lot up.
Yes.
If this was zoned R4, R3, and we were talking about a 1-foot variance or something on, it might be a different story, but.
Does this touch R4 zoning?
It does, and so I'll pull up the zoning map for you, and we can take a look at what's in the area. So the property is highlighted in a dark yellow heavy line. That light yellow is single family, that kind of dark maroon brown is R4 multifamily, and then the purple is commercial. And so it does abut multifamily zoning and development to the west, and then single family to the north, east, and south. And it's bounded by Pearl and Ellington Street.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
So all this is R4,
That's all R4.
and
Correct.
this is R4 too.
That- right.
And
That's
the-
Riverside Apartments and Bonita
Up
Creek
above,
Apartments
Yes, ma'am.
on the backside.
I
Yeah,
see.
and so
different.
Just wanna make
those
sure
gray
I'm-
squares that you see, those are actually structures. So those are buildings.
I'm just curious if, from the city's or from planning and zoning's perspective, since your suggestion is approval, do you feel that approval of this type of variance opens a door or sets a precedent for not necessarily similar split lots, because I think, we can all understand the idea, of trying to have income producing property and also trying to make more available land for building and all like that, but also taking a single family structure out of compliance, that's kind of the thing that's lingering for me, is that not necessarily, I do have some questions about that, but is taking a home that is in compliance and making it out of compliance in order to create another residential lot. And is that something that we would anticipate hearing again? And then would it be our duty to provide that same grace to another applicant in the future?
In my opinion, no, this variance wouldn't set precedent. Each variance request is reviewed on a individual case-by-case basis. Just because there's other variances in the area that have been approved, that doesn't have any bearing on an individual request. Staff finds that this property is uniquely situated because it is on a corner lot. It is overly sized, even in comparison to the other single-family lots on the property. And it's in a location where Ellington actually stubs and dead ends into a multifamily development. And so based on all those and its proximity to other different types of varieties of housing, that's why staff finds this is different. If this was a single-family home 2 lots down in the middle of the block, staff would not be recommending approval. Because it has adequate street access, because it can still meet building setbacks, because it can accommodate a single-family home of similar size and character to the other lots, that's why staff is recommending approval. As far as the impact to the traffic and the density being negligible in comparison to what's already in the area. So in my opinion, no, it wouldn't set precedent. And just because this gets approved doesn't mean that the neighbor, it doesn't mean it's open house for all the property owners in the area to submit variance requests.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Any other public comment, or we'll close that if it's not? Okay, hearing no other public comment, we will close that section, and we'll entertain a motion.
Well, I will make a motion to approve pending the width of the lot is made at a minimum of 50 foot to meet at least some standard for R3, R4.
All right, so we have a motion, do we have a second? To move forward for or against, we have to have a second, so you can die from,
You
second.
could also second if you would
I
like.
can. Second the motion. Discussion.
Small lot.
Okay.
Now we've enlarged it a little bit, but it's still a small lot. You put a home on there. That's my objection.
I think if we move it up to 50 feet, you're further encouraging the zone change, which may not that it's up to us, but it may not necessarily be the best thing for this lot and area. So maybe we shouldn't help encourage it. And it looks like to me the reason how that got to be a little less than 50 is they took a even 10 foot off the back patio and then just left the extra. And it's a little bit of a, is it a rhombus? So if they, it would only take a little bit of that lot line moving to make the front of it 50, but we're talking inches. So
Agreed.
that's why I was.
If the intention is to eventually get to some multifamily standard, which it does abut another multifamily property, and it's on an alley that is, indicative of that type of traffic, that type of behavior, et cetera, then if I were going to vote to approve it, then I would want it to at least be in compliance with the minimum standards for the anticipated use of the property instead of allowing for just all-out non-compliance. And that was kind of my thought process in that. And while I understand that it's encouraging of that behavior, I do believe that that's the behavior that I believe that's what would take place. And while those are single family down that road, there are many other places that have similar a rental income property, multifamily duplex, et cetera, and it kind of makes sense. So that was kind of my thought process there. I do get the 10-foot, but at the same time, it's not 10 foot all around, it's just a patio, so good for them.
Any other discussion?
As I mentioned, I'm not sure that we meet all the requirements that are supposed to happen. If we went through and had this rezoned R4 and we were having this same discussion about, a variance that would give them a foot or less than a foot on the lot width and a little bit on the depth, and, I think that's a completely different discussion they would have there, but I'm not sure that we meet
But there is no
unique
opportunity.
circumstances.
There's no opportunity for them to make it an R4 until it's a lot first. So I don't know if that argument is, I don't know.
But it looked like, Lillian, if you got the map that shows the zoning.
And I just wanted, if I could, piggyback off of Sarah's comment. So we don't zone portions of a lot. And so we would not accept an application for a zone change on the property until it was subdivided, which I think is one of the reasons why they chose the subdivision route first. And because even with a zone change, it's going to be non-conforming, just because of the size. And so if the variance is denied, essentially it doesn't create an avenue for them to seek a zone change in the future. Does that make sense? Because we're not going to zone a portion of a single-family lot.
It looks like up there at College, there's the whole lots that appear to be zoned R4 up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that might be a reasonable way to go about, I don't know.
Yeah, so in essence, they would have to change the entire lot to R4.
Right.
And then come back and seek a variance for subdivision. So yes, in that regard, they could still seek a zone change, but it'd be for the whole lot instead of just a portion of it.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails.
All right, thank you.
That concludes our meeting. I think we have nothing else before the group. And so we will call it adjourned at 4:43 p.m.
All right, thank you.